All right, today we're going to talk about one single day back in 1683 that literally slammed the door shut when an entire empire and completely redrew the map of Europe. We're diving into the story of the Battle of Vienna. And let me tell you, it's this incredible moment, just packed with desperation, some really unlikely alliances, and one of the most epic scenes in all of military history.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let me start with a question to kind of set the stage. What do you think was the largest cavalry charge in all of history? Seriously, think about it. You're probably picturing something from a huge Hollywood blockbuster, right? Or maybe some famous ancient battle. Well, you're gonna want to stick around because the answer is right at the heart of our story today. And trust me, it is absolutely mind-blowing. Okay, so let's paint a picture. The year is 1683. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire has been this absolute powerhouse, just constantly expanding from the east. And now they've got this colossal army on the march, and its sights are locked on one place, the very heart of the Holy Roman Empire, the city of Vienna.
So you might be asking, why Vienna? Well, for the Ottomans, this was the ultimate prize. If you captured Vienna, you controlled the Danube River. And the Danube, think of it like the main highway for all trade and military movement right into Central Europe. It was everything. And for the guy in charge, the Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, the timing felt, well, perfect. You see, Vienna was in a bad way, really weakened by a recent outbreak of the plague. To him, it looked like a prize just sitting there, ripe for the taking.
And the force they sent to take it, whoa, it was staggering. Now look, estimates vary a little bit, but the main Ottoman army marching on that city was somewhere around 150,000 troops. Just let that number sink in. To give you some perspective, the entire population of London at that time was only about 500,000. This was an invasion on a scale that Europe had frankly rarely ever seen. So, on July 14th, 1683, that massive army arrives right at the city gates. And the emperor, Leopold I, he had already bailed, fled with his whole court, leaving the city's defense in the hands of what was basically a skeleton crew. The siege of Vienna was on. For 2 long, brutal months, the city somehow just held on. But it was under a relentless, non-stop assault. And the whole time, the clock was just ticking, ticking, ticking. You had these Ottoman sappers, these are expert miners, digging tunnels day and night, trying to get under the city walls to plant explosives. They were getting closer and closer, and then, by early September, they did it. They blew huge breaches in the walls. Time was officially running out.
I mean, the imbalance of power here was just staggering. Let's look at the numbers. Inside the city walls, you've got Count Starthumberg. He's in command of about 15,000 professional soldiers, plus maybe 5,000 citizen volunteers who pitched in. Outside, Kara Mustafa's besieging force absolutely dwarfed them. To say the odds weren't good would be the understatement of the century. And if you want to get a real sense of just how desperate things were inside Vienna, listen to this order from Count Starhumberg. It says everything. Food was running out. Disease was spreading everywhere. And with the constant bombardment and the nonstop mining attempts, exhaustion itself became a killer. People were just dropping. They were at their absolute breaking point.
But Vienna wasn't completely alone. Even as the city was being squeezed to death, behind the scenes, there was this frantic, diplomatic scramble to pull together a relief army. We're talking about a total last-ditch effort, one that was bringing together old enemies to face a common threat.
And this effort, it led to something called the Holy League. At its core, it was basically a pact between the Holy Roman Emperor and the King of Poland, John III Sobieski. And the deal was simple. If the Ottomans attacked either of their capitals, Krakow or Vienna, the other guy would come running to help. It was a promise that was about to be put to the ultimate test. And the army they put together? It was a real coalition force, a true mix of different groups. You had Austrians, Germans from places like Bavaria and Saxony, and crucially, this big contingent of Poles and Cossacks. And leading the whole thing? King Sobieski himself, who was, only one of the most respected military commanders of his entire era. So in early September, the relief army, they finally make it. They reach the Kahlenberg Hills, which overlook the entire city of Vienna. Can you imagine? The exhausted soldiers inside the city could actually see their signal fires burning on the hills. After 2 months of absolute hell, hope had finally arrived. The stage was set for the final showdown. September 12th. This was the day. The battle kicked off right at dawn. The Holy League forces started pouring down from the hills, crashing into the Ottoman siege lines.
And everyone knew this was going to be a long, grueling, all-day slugfest.
The Allies had a pretty methodical plan. First, hit the Ottoman flanks, the sides, to pin them down so they couldn't move. Then just start systematically pushing toward the center, taking back key positions and villages. And it worked. By late afternoon, the Ottoman army was exhausted, they were stretched thin, and they were perfectly set up for the final, decisive blow. So, at around 6 o'clock in the evening, the final phase kicks off. A combined force, get this, of 18,000 horsemen. We're talking cavalry from all across the Holy Roman Empire and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, all gathered together at the top of that ridge. And that is the answer to the question I asked at the very beginning. 18,000 horsemen charging down those hills in one single thunderous wave. It is the largest cavalry charge in the entire history of warfare. And right at the tip of that spear, leading the whole attack, were 3,000 of Poland's elite winged hussars, with King Sobieski himself at the front.
The charge was, well, it was unstoppable. It just smashed into the tired Ottoman lines and shattered them completely. The Ottoman army just broke and ran. It was over. After the battle, King Sobieski famously wrote a letter to the Pope, kind of twisting a line from Julius Caesar. He wrote, "We came, we saw, God conquered. Vienna was saved." The victory was absolute, no question. But the consequences of what happened on that single day, they would ripple across the entire continent for centuries to come. You have to understand, this wasn't just the end of a battle, it was the end of an entire era.
And you can really see how decisive it was when you look at the casualties. The Ottoman army suffered just immense losses, not just in that final charge, but over the whole siege. The Holy League, on the other hand, their casualties were still significant, of course, but they were far, far lighter in comparison. Okay, so let's zoom out and look at the long-term impact, because it was huge. First, this one battle basically put a full stop to Ottoman expansion into Europe. Period. Second, it kicked off a 16-year conflict called the Great Turkish War, which allowed the Habsburgs to reclaim huge chunks of territory, like all of Hungary. It completely shifted the balance of power on the continent, for good. And what about the man who led the Ottoman siege, Kara Mustafa Pasha? Well, for his failure, he paid the ultimate price. On Christmas Day, of all days, in 1683, on the Sultan's direct order, he was executed in Belgrade. They strangled him with a silk rope. You know, the victory at Vienna wasn't just a turning point. It was really a hinge point in history. It locked in the future of the Habsburg Empire and stopped Ottoman advances cold. And all of that leaves us with this one massive question. How different would Europe be today, the political map, the culture, everything, if those 18,000 horsemen had never made that charge down the Kahlenberg Hills? It really makes you think.